any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you.
Before we get into this, hit that subscribe button, because Senator Alyssa Slotkin just put Pete Hegseth on the spot. And his refusal to give straight answers should concern every American. Watch this.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I said in your hearing, when you had your confirmation hearing, that my biggest concern with you at the helm was the potential use of the military in ways that contradict the Constitution or that taint what I hope we all want, which is an apolitical military. And when I asked you about whether you would accept an order that was actually given to your predecessor, Secretary Esper, Trump's SecDef, to deploy active duty troops against unarmed protesters and to, in Secretary Esper's words, shoot at them, shoot at their legs. You said this was all theoretical. Here we are, a few months later, you've deployed 4,700 troops to Los Angeles and against the wishes of the governor. And my colleague across the aisle was right. It is the first time since 1965 that we have deployed Guard troops without the permission of the governor. In all the instances he laid out, the president had sent in the military to protect protesters, not against the protesters. So you may dismiss it, but I feel like this is a fundamental issue of American democracy. If you love your country and you want an apolitical military, then it should be the last resort, not the first resort in our country to use them. So to get to the non-theoretical, have you authorized the uniformed military to detain or arrest protesters in Los Angeles?
Senator, I would just start by saying you're not a protester if you're throwing concrete
100%.
at law
Arrest those
enforcement
people.
officers.
Throw them in the jail. 100%. But what you're doing is something different. Everyone knows this is a political decision, right? So we don't trust that you're using the best interests of the military, certainly, and of democracy on top of that. So have you given the order? That's all I want to know. It's not theoretical. For the U.S. military, not law enforcement. They can arrest all day long. That's their job. Do they have the ability, the uniformed military, to arrest and detain protesters currently today? It's a yes or no thing, authority.
It's sort of amusing the extent to which the speculation is out there. These troops are given very clear orders.
Then what is the order? Then list it out for us. Be a man, list it out. Did you authorize them to detain or arrest? That is a fundamental issue of democracy. I'm not trying to be a snot here. I'm just trying to get the actual, did you authorize them to do that?
All of these orders and what they're sent there to do are public. They are there
so say it. So say it. Yes or no?
I'd like to.
Please, yes or no?
As I've said time and time again through interruption, they're there to protect law enforcement,
do they have
ICE
the ability
officers
to arrest?
who are trying to do their job, deporting illegals who were allowed in by the previous administration.
So they cannot arrest and detain citizens of the United States, the uniformed military.
As we've stated, if necessary, in their own self-defense, they could temporarily detain and hand over to ICE. But there's no arresting going on. And you know this better than you're trying to play political games. There's no arresting of U.S. personnel.
Of the U.S. military against members of the protest. Have you authorized U.S. military cyber tools to investigate people participating in these protests? Yes or no?
Certainly in no way that I'd be aware of.
Okay, that's good. I love that answer. That's great. Have you given the order to be able to shoot at unarmed protesters in any way? I'm just asking the question. Don't laugh. Like the whole country. And by the way, my colleagues across the aisle.
What is that based on? What evidence would you have that an order like that has ever been given?
Giving that order to your predecessor, to a Republican Secretary of Defense, who I give a lot of credit to because he didn't accept the order. He had more guts and balls than you because he said, I'm not going to send in the uniformed military to do something that I know in my gut isn't right. He was asked to shoot at their legs. He wrote that in his book. That's not hearsay. So your poo-pooing of this, it just shows you don't understand who we are as a country, who we are. And all of my colleagues across the aisle, especially the ones that served, should want an apolitical military and not want citizens to be scared of their own military. I love the military. I served alongside my whole life, so I'm worried about you tainting it. Have you given the order? Have you given the order that they can use lethal force against honor? I want the answer to be no. Please tell me it's no. Have you given the order?
Senator, I'd be careful what you read in books and believing it, except for the Bible.
Oh, my God. So your former predecessor, I guess that's not enough for you. Okay, on Iran. I don't think there's a debate. There's like a cat fight going on in your own party about whether to go after Iran. Have you commissioned any day after planning? So any force protection, any use of ground troops in Iran, any cost assessments? Because I don't think we doubt what we can do as a country in the attack. It's the day after with Iraq and Afghanistan that so many of us have learned to be so deeply concerned about. Have you authorized day after planning?
As I've said, we have plans for everything, Senator.
Okay.
And I would also reiterate how we began, that there will be a classified portion of this 15 minutes after we adjourn.
This is exactly why these questions have to be asked. You can agree or disagree with Senator Slotkin's politics, but when the United States military is deployed domestically, Americans deserve clear answers about the limits of its authority. Period. And Slotkin wasn't saying violent rioters should be allowed to attack law enforcement. In fact, she explicitly said the opposite. If somebody is throwing concrete at officers or committing violence, arrest them and prosecute them. Nobody is arguing that violent behavior should simply be ignored. But that's precisely why Hegseth's attempt to blur the distinction between violent individuals and protesters is so frustrating. The question was about the military. And uniformed troops detain American citizens. Under what circumstances? What are their rules of engagement? What happens if protesters confront them? Have they been authorized to use lethal force? Are military surveillance or cyber capabilities being used against protesters? Those are not crazy questions. Those are questions Congress should be asking whenever military forces are deployed on American soil. And Slotkin kept pushing because she clearly wasn't satisfied with the answers she was getting. What really made this exchange remarkable was when she brought up former Defense Secretary Mark Esper and his claims about conversations inside the Trump administration during the 2020 protests. Hegseth responded by essentially telling her to be careful about believing what she reads in books, except the Bible. Seriously, that's the response. You are sitting before the United States Senate discussing the potential use of military force against Americans, and instead of simply saying, "No, I have not authorized troops to shoot unarmed protesters," you're cracking a line about what books people should believe. Just answer the question, because this shouldn't even be partisan. Democrats should demand clear answers from Republican administrations, and Republicans should demand exactly the same thing from Democratic administrations. Nobody should want a president from either party to have unchecked authority to turn the American military into some kind of domestic political police force. The military has an extraordinary amount of power, and that's exactly why there have to be clear boundaries separating military operations from ordinary civilian law enforcement. And Slotkin's broader warning deserves attention. Americans should never look at their own military and wonder whether those troops are being deployed for legitimate security purposes or because the president wants to make a political statement. Our service members should never be placed in that position either. These men and women volunteered to defend the Constitution and the country. They should not become political props for Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, Democrats, Republicans, or anybody else. And when a senator asks the Secretary of Defense where those lines are drawn, the answer should be immediate and crystal clear. Instead, we watched this exchange descend into interruptions, accusations of political games, and arguments over what previous officials supposedly said. That's not reassuring. Slotkin was aggressive. Absolutely. She clearly came into this hearing ready for a confrontation. But underneath all the theatrics was a legitimate question that Hegseth should have been prepared to answer directly. What are the limits? Because once you normalize deploying military forces into politically charged situations at home, those limits matter enormously. Today, You might support the president making that decision because you agree with his immigration policies or his response to protests. But what happens when the other party controls the White House? Would Republicans be comfortable with a Democratic president deploying troops over the objections of a Republican governor? Would conservatives be comfortable watching military personnel deployed during protests involving causes they support? That's why constitutional guardrails aren't supposed to depend on whether your team is currently in power. Slotkin clearly wanted Hegseth to put those guardrails on the record, and watching him repeatedly clash with her rather than simply laying out those boundaries is exactly what made this exchange so heated. You don't have to like Slotkin. You don't have to agree with every accusation she made. But Americans absolutely have the right to demand transparency when their government deploys military forces domestically. And the Secretary of Defense should understand why Congress is asking these questions. The military belongs to the American people. It does not belong to Donald Trump. It does not belong to Pete Hegseth. It does not belong to any political party. That's the principle Slotkin was fighting over in this hearing, and regardless of where you fall politically, it's a principle worth protecting. Now I want to hear from you. Did Slotkin expose a serious problem with Hegseth's answers? Or do you think she was turning a legitimate security operation into a political spectacle? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe for more political breakdowns and congressional clashes like this one.